Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wisdom Seeker Live for this week, the week of Thanksgiving here in the U.S. And look forward to spending some time with you today and with our special guest, Gary Frey. Just a reminder, hope that you'll let us know where you're joining from. And also feel free to share your questions and comments with Gary or myself or both, and look forward to that. And as always, we start the podcast with the insight as to our view of wisdom. And wisdom is a journey or a process. It involves primarily 3 steps. First of all is to gain knowledge. And that's something that I hope everyone's doing on a regular basis, and pick up facts, figures, information, formally, informally. And then the next step in that process as we move towards wisdom is to gain understanding. And understanding is where we begin to take the knowledge we have and apply it in our lives, making choices, finding solutions, and looking for answers. Sometimes understanding can be thought of as experience that we gain, and it's a great next step. And then the most important step is when we leap from knowledge and understanding into wisdom. And the big thing about that leap is we're going from facts, figures, and information and some application to a much bigger perspective. Key thing is that we begin to see that our knowledge and our understanding is something we use for ourselves, and that we begin to realize that it's for inside of us and outside of us and our world around us, both close and far. And more importantly is that as we grow in wisdom, we realize that our choices, our decisions, our actions, our attitudes impact the lives of other people, family, friends, acquaintances, neighbors, colleagues. And as we begin to get that much bigger perspective and consider those other impacts, then we begin to gain wisdom. We begin to get to a point where we make choices with that bigger context. And for those of us that are of a spiritual nature or a spiritual bent, we kind of like to think of it in terms of we begin to see things through God's eyes. And so our goal for the podcast is to help each other as we share wisdom, and to be in a point of being a wisdom seeker together. So we've had my friend Gary on before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on introduction. I'll let Gary catch us up where he's at. So Gary, welcome aboard. Good morning. Glad to have you again.
Good morning, Kevin. You are a sight for sore eyes, and even a semi-cloudy eye. Oh, man. And happy Thanksgiving to you and everybody else out there. While I was in the green room, I saw this little button, share with your audience. I'm like, the curiosity in me decided, oh yeah, I think I need to do that. So I'm doing it on my LinkedIn page too.
Outstanding. That's great. The more the merrier. Before we get started, I just want to welcome Jeremy. Jeremy, appreciate you, brother. He's one of our regulars. And so Gary, I know it's about a month ago that we were together.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
We've been having some discussion. Of course, I always like to know what my guests are learning from a wisdom standpoint. And in particular, I know Gary's been really working on promoting his book, and the book is Silence the Imposter. Am I getting it right, Gary?
That's right. That's right. Here it is. Silence the Imposter.
So tell us what's going on there. I know you've been very actively promoting, and it's also a point of wisdom in your life. Welcome, Johan.
Johan. Oh, man. South African Johan Kornoff. Happy Thanksgiving to you, buddy. Well, here's what's funny. It is an evolving journey of learning, right? I mean, every new adventure has learning in it if we're paying attention. And so, writing the book was one thing, having it done for a year, going through the publishing labyrinth was another, finally getting it up and doing a launch on October 17 was another, then having a retinal tear during the launch.
Oh, wow. I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, I lost eyesight in my left eye. It started like during a live one of these with Hillary Porta. It was the last 4 minutes of a 1 hour deal. And all of a sudden I see these dark black squiggles going across my left eye. And I'm like, uh-oh, that's weird. And then I kind of made it through it. But then that evening everything was getting hazy and foggy, like looking through a frosted glass.
Oh, wow.
By the next morning, I could barely see my hand this far in front of me.
Oh, wow.
It was very strange. And I knew something was not right. And my father actually lost his eye due to the same thing, a torn retina, which it wasn't like I was doing jumping jacks or, anything crazy. I was just on a podcast and this happened. So fortunately, I've got my eyesight back. Thank you, Dr. Tucker. And, they did emergency laser surgery that day on the 18th. So the 17th in the afternoon is when this first occurred. And so a month without working out, boy, that's a challenge. But,
oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. But because my dad did not, and this was 25 or more years ago when it happened to him. So the technology wasn't as advanced, and he didn't know, and so he was working vigorously, and with only one leg, it was always a workout whenever he was working.
Oh, wow.
And so he knew something was wrong after this surgery. I mean, it was within a couple of days, evidently, and then he ended up losing the eye, unfortunately. So that's no small feat. But then promoting a book, holy moly. And I like promoting other people. I like promoting other people more than my own stuff, quite frankly, which is just hard, but I just have to keep going. You know what? This really helps. I mean, and it's not because it's my idea. There's nothing new under the sun. It is part of my journey, but it's more about what have we learned in the struggles, right? And being willing to share those things. And the notes that I've gotten from people that I've known or people that were completely out of the blue. Even my neighbor pulled me over Saturday, and he's from Brazil, and he said, Gary, I had no idea what you went through. I'm really enjoying this book. Like, wow, thank you. So that's extremely humbling. It's just really wonderful to see that. So anyway, and I'm working on an audio book, which holy moly, that's a whole new, like, seriously, here's one funny thing that I got to tell you. So Jeffrey Gitomer is a friend, and he's a 5-time New York Times bestselling author. So when I first wrote the book, I went to him and said, Jeffrey, and some people either hate him or they love him. If they know him, they probably love him, but he can be a little rough Brooklyn New Yorker on the outside, and every third word is the F-bomb almost, which is not my style. But I knew I would get the straight scoop from Jeffrey because we've been very good friends for 20 plus years. And he was the #1 columnist on bizjournals.com and all of our publications when I was president of bizjournals.com. So that's how we became friends. But I knew he'd just shoot me the straight scoop. And so he ended up reading the manuscript, and he wrote back, and I will never delete this text, at least on purpose. I may accidentally, I hope not. But it's like, he said, "You're very good," which I was completely shocked. I expected him to say, "Do not let it see the light of day, and do not embarrass your children or grandchildren." I thought.
Such a high opinion there, brother.
Yeah, but I really didn't know. And, he sold millions and millions and millions of books and published by Simon & Schuster and all these, like amazing people. So I decided to go down the audio book journey. And so I've got a guy remotely, like, it's expensive to do this. And then you got to do it, and you have to do it word for word. Holy moly. So I did a test. I sent it to Jeffrey, and immediately I get, "This is not good. Call me tomorrow."
Oh, wow.
So yeah, he was blunt. Like, I got what I expected with the book. I got it on the audio. And so he did a coaching session with me in his menagerie. I mean, he has the most amazing place. He bought a lot of what used to be the Lance Cracker Factory in Charlotte, North Carolina, as his dwelling place and his studio and all this other stuff. And so, I'm just so grateful for somebody like that that's willing to help a neophyte like me. But it's extremely humbling, man. It's like, oh man, this could take me 160 hours to get through a 5-hour book and recording it.
Well, and I think a lot of people don't realize how much time is involved in doing audio for a book. I mean, it's not.
Oh man,
it's many hours. Welcome to Lee and John Hart. Glad to have you guys here with us. And again, remind everyone to be willing to ask questions, make comments. Always keeps it interesting. So
that is what makes it interesting.
Huh?
That is what makes it interesting, when we have some dialogue going back and forth.
That's right. So where are things with the book? I know you're selling some, right?
Yeah, it's, this is another thing that's really funny. I think it's funny. And it's probably another one of these secrets that a lot of people don't want to talk about. So the first 2 weeks that the book was actually it was live on Amazon. It actually went up on the 22nd of September. I took it down within hours because we saw that there was a typo on something. And man, trying to go through the labyrinth of Amazon to get that fixed is no small feat. Just trying to find out who do you call, or reach out to. That is a challenge. So it was down for 2 weeks. It went back up the week before my launch, when I was supposed to be speaking in Boston. And then that got canceled. So it was a very soft launch. But nonetheless, it was the #1 new release in 2 categories for 2 weeks solid. Like, wow, this is amazing. Now, I didn't know. I had no idea how many books had this really sold. And then I figured out, you can go into what's Kindle. It's called Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP, and you can see your dashboard. Well, that's extremely humbling. And here was the other thing, that on the 17th, when we were doing some live broadcasts and this and that about it, the night before, it was 95,000th in books sold, 95,000th. And then it went down to 6,822nd of all books being sold that day. Wow, that sounds impressive. And I was top 10 new release, #3, actually bestseller for one of those days, that day. Well, a couple weeks later, after I can kind of get my eyesight back after that surgery, I'm looking and I see, and as of today, This book has sold about 240 copies.
All those big numbers sounding, and yeah.
So, that is like, well, yeah, at that rate, there's no way I'm ever going to recoup a $10,000 investment. Never. However, my wife was the one that actually encouraged me to actually publish it, because I knew it was going to cost some money after these other two publishers said no. And then even after finding, like, I was talking with Jeffrey yesterday, and the Little Red Book of Selling has sold millions and millions and millions of copies. And his audiobook beat out Good to Great. Like, and Simon & Schuster even said, Jeffrey, don't show up for the awards ceremony. You're going up against Good to Great. You're going blah, blah, blah. He ended up winning. And if you listen to that audiobook, it's really masterfully done. So anyway, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. He made, I think he got like $110,000. And then he was selling these in, like, he had a broker that went to China, and he said there were more sold in China, like threefold over what he made in, like, what they sold in the US. And he got next to nothing, because they were lying about it, like, oh yeah, and he has a picture where, what was it? It was like a big famous book. This guy had this bicycle filled with books, and his Little Red Book of Selling was next to, I think it was something about the Pope or something like that. And I was like, which is kind of funny even in and of itself. But, it's kind of an amazing world that you have no idea. People think, oh, wow, bestseller, #1 new release. Well, let me tell you the rest of the story. But a lot of people don't want to do that. They just want to post, hey, best-selling author, blah, blah, blah. Well, they probably sold 200 copies too. It comes down to your why, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I think it comes down to your why. Because if your why is, man, I want to get rich on this, you are in for a large disappointment, likely. Mm-hmm. You might get lucky. You might have something that's really amazing, chicken soup for the soul or whatever. But you are up against some massive headwinds.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I found out, and this, I've got a friend that spent $120,000 to have somebody else write his book for him. And that it's guaranteed to be a Wall Street Journal bestseller. Mm. Mm. And if you want to pay an extra $200,000, you can be a guaranteed New York Times best-selling audiobook, $200,000. So that's what you're really up against. If and then if you go with a known publisher, they kind of own it. Well, they do own the rights. They're going to tell you what the cover is going to look like. They're going to tell you, and they're going to take out certain things and try to sanitize it. And I thought, I just want my voice. Mm-hmm. I just want my voice. And you know what? Anybody listening to this that is thinking about it, or even if you're just writing on LinkedIn, use your voice, because it's unique. It's wonderful. It's how you were made.
Yeah, that's our story, and that's our power. And because our voice, our story is ours, and there is none other like it. There are some similarities, but none like it. We've had someone join us, looks like from your network, and I only see LinkedIn user. If that person will type in their name, I'll recognize them and appreciate them. And so,
I see John Hart.
Yep.
Oh, wow, we have 2 Johans. How cool. Johan Kornoff, who's our mutual friend, and then Johan Van Wyck.
Oh, okay.
Which I'm probably screwing up that name. Sorry, Johan. And he's also in Cape Town.
Oh, wow.
Cape Town is just filled with Johans, evidently.
Apparently. Well,
and then Dorian's on too.
So going back to the book, we've prior shows, we've been able to talk about some of the different weapons that you talk about. So share a bit about the weapons that you've come to understand and gain the wisdom about how to silence the imposter.
Well, so here's a funny story about those. I wrote the book, the second half of the book first, which was really kind of my journey. And then I felt stuck because I really didn't want the book to be about me. I still don't. But I'm like, how does this help somebody? And then I realized, wait a minute. When I look back through the journey and you see patterns, or I see patterns.
Yeah.
And the weapons became unearthed, if you will. Like I discovered, like, oh yeah. Usually through trials and tribulations. I wish it was not that way. I wish so much that we could just like take a pill for it, but no. But just like anything in life, I was in Mr. Kansas as a 17-year-old bodybuilder, and then I didn't lift weights for 20 more years because I saw these dudes doing steroids. That was an amazing moment for me because I was in the bottom third. I wasn't in the top three. I was in the bottom third. But people wanting to take an easy path drove people to do steroids and still drives people to do whatever. Take an easy path. The problem is the easy path usually comes up short, and it usually has a cost. I know people that were on that stage with me back in 1979, and they are dead because of steroids. Others lost parts of their limbs or whatever because of steroids, because they took an easy path. They didn't know. And so some of these difficulties were kind of really unearthed in the difficulties of my own journey. So the first weapon, and it's like, it's super powerful, but it's super simple. Realize you're not alone. When we allow ourselves to be isolated in our own minds, in this isolation chamber of nobody knows the trouble I've seen, and we're not willing to share it with somebody, we just stay isolated, and the imposter just wants to scream. And that's all we hear. And I learned that when I discovered my partner's embezzlement twice. I came to Charlotte in 1994. Because of that, I didn't want to destroy him. I didn't want to destroy my name if I exposed him. And so my only option was to leave Wichita, Kansas. I didn't like it. I'm glad I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, because we have hills and trees, and we really didn't have much of either of those in Kansas. So I'm very grateful, but it wasn't an easy transition. And I remember, because I was so embarrassed, like, what an idiot. How did I miss that? And how did I see it, miss it twice, but only when I talked, like I sheepishly admitted it to somebody, this guy goes, "Oh man, I've been through that too." What? You would not be, you'd be shocked. You would be shocked at how many people have been through partner betrayal, embezzlement, those kind of things. And it wasn't even the money, like the money was crushing, but the betrayal of trust, that was the number one thing. So a very powerful weapon, if you're willing to pull it out and just confide in somebody. You don't have to broadcast it to the world.
Right.
But if you just confide in somebody, you'd be surprised that all of a sudden it can tamp that thing down. Weapon number 4 is actually tied to that, but this one takes a lot more courage. Both of them take courage, but and that is admit and put a light on, shine a light on the stuff that you don't want anybody to know.
Right.
What? That sounds masochistic, and it feels like it can be. But my favorite example of that is Tana Green. She wrote this book, Creating a World of Difference. And I really like this book. I mean, it's beautiful. She did a very beautiful job on it. But in this book, she admits stuff that she didn't want anybody in her WPO crowd, which is Women's Professional Organization. And she was running, now she's running a 12,000 employee company, but she had 10,000 when I was coaching her. But in that book, she talks about having a child out of wedlock at age 15. Oh boy, you can't talk about that in the South, especially when you're hobnobbing around, these very powerful women. Well, then she marries the guy, has the baby. I appreciate that. It's admirable. He beats her up, puts her in the hospital, and abandons her. Ooh. Then she goes back to high school 2 years later. That's humbling. She doesn't want to do the easy way out. And not that it is, and I'm not disparaging GEDs, okay? My dad started the first over-the-road trucker GED program in the world. So, I'm not disparaging that, but she wanted to actually walk the stage. She wanted to go and get back to high school. So she went 2 years behind her. In high school, that's a kind of a big deal. Baby on her hip, and graduates high school, and she wants to go to college, but she can afford 2 years of secretarial school, not college. Well, you don't want to talk about any of that when you're hobnobbing with these very powerful female executives. But she put a light on it, and she put it in a book. And I said, Tana, what was that like? And she said it was terrifying at first, but she said, man, you had no idea how liberating that became for me. And how many people afterwards came up and have told her, Tana, I've been through a similar thing. Thank you for being willing. Like, there's something beautiful and liberating about humility. So those two weapons kind of go in hand. And then I'll give you another tease, like weapon number 5, or no, actually weapon number 4. Let me think about this. No, this was actually weapon number 3.
Okay.
Weapon number 4 is focus more on serving somebody else than on how they perceive you. Think about that. When we focus on how we're being perceived, we get really nervous. Oh boy, is my hair right? Do I even have enough hair? What about all these wrinkles? Screw that.
Yeah.
Focus on serving somebody else. When we get our eyes off of ourselves, all of a sudden beautiful things happen. And it doesn't mean that we're not conscious about things. It's just, I'm going to focus more on serving you than being worried about how you're perceiving me. Man. And again, like, that revelation didn't just come in a dream. That came through some severe crushing.
More like nightmares.
Well, so that in particular, I had a recurring, and it wasn't a nightmare. It was a real thing that happened. So when I was president of bizjournals.com, I flew all over the country and spoke to these 41 publishers that were very threatened by our online entity, which was set up as a separate company in the rock'emsock'em.com days, where they were all afraid they're going by the way of the dodo bird. Bricks and mortar were worth way less than fluffy pink air in the .com world. And so they were very frightened by that. So I had to go and meet with them, their staffs, etc., frequently, and give a lot of presentations. Well, we had 360 feedback or 180 feedback, and we had comment cards on all these. And one of the comment cards came back and said this: Gary is very good one-on-one. In front of large crowds, not so much. Twist the knife, man. Well, that was in 2000. Fast forward, and this is like 2006. 2007. I think it was 2006. I'm emceeing a big event, and we were doing 2 to 3 of these a year for 300 ultra high net worth families, billionaires down to major league sports owners that were in our private equity group. And it was a by invitation only group. So extremely discriminating crowd. And I was working for a very difficult CEO that was an Air Force guy and very critical. And each time that we would do one, it was a 3 days where I'm on the stage and I'm having to and I'm shepherding all of this thing.
Right.
And then we had 2 days of management meetings afterwards. And then I'd get the earful of, what I did wrong or whatever. And so I'm writing in my prayer journal the night before I have to fly out for one of these events. And I'm going, Lord, I feel like, what am I doing? I feel like I'm slow of speech, just like what Moses said, where 40 years in the desert, he gets all his confidence crushed out of him, and then God's like, you're going back to Egypt and you're going to set these people free. Can you have Aaron please talk? Because I can't speak. And that's how I felt. And this thought hit me. I don't know if it was God's voice because I didn't hear an audible voice, but this thought came racing through my head and just rang out like a clear bell. And this thought hit me. A servant is not to be concerned about how they're perceived. A servant is to be concerned about serving. Mm-hmm. Go serve them. Well, that just made me stop in my tracks. And so I fly out. Then the first morning when we're doing our welcome to everybody, or the afternoon, I guess, I can see people tuning me out, fiddling on their phones, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And that would always make me like, it would just completely dishevel me. In this case, like I still perceived it, but I'm like, no, Gary, you serve them. You just serve them. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what they think of you. If they think you're a fool, it doesn't matter. Well, then the last evening, a woman named Kathy Henry came up to me, and she was a very high-ranking exec at McDonald's Corporation. She had retired early, and she pulls me up off the dessert line, and she says, Gary, I know how difficult these things are because I've done this for McDonald's Corporation with 10,000 attendees, like thousands and thousands of franchisees. I know how difficult it is. I've never seen anybody do this better than you, and you are so good in front of people. I just wanted to drop my dessert right there. But the shift was this for me. Just focus on serving them. Just focus on serving them. It doesn't matter what they think of you. Focus on serving them. So those are some pretty powerful ones. But in each of those cases, you can see they don't come easy.
Right. Well, the couple of comments from Johan that I think are worth popping up. And also welcome, Jane. Glad to have you. Jane's one of my connections that is with us periodically. Glad to have you. And but Johan makes a comment that an easy path is short-term game filled with regrets. And that is so true. Part of gaining wisdom is getting off the short-term gain perspective. And that's such a powerful comment. And then he has a follow-on that, again, resonates really well. Life is so much easier when it's not about you. And it really is. And when we're not focused on us, like you talked about, you're focused on serving, life becomes easier because, this thing of comparison becomes less of an issue. And so it's a lot of takeaway there. One of the things that I deal with and that I've had to wrestle with is, for the longest time, and especially in our culture in the US, the focus is on the outcome, the success, the reward, the whatever. And that is the wrong focus. The focus is, what am I doing? Where am I going? And it's about the journey. And when we have a focus on the journey, then we begin to gain wisdom and insight, and we get a better perspective of what we can do and not do, or control and not control. And that's so freeing. And so, great thoughts. Let's see. And then Jane makes a comment that, boy, I hope that more of the audience, this is true of them, and that is that that sounds like a message from God to me. And you know,
I think it was too.
And that's the beauty of not focusing on the outcome, but on the journey, because then we can pick up on these messages. And that is what seeking wisdom is about, is getting these messages that we're supposed to be getting. Let's see. The other Johann makes a comment. He says, I often focus on what people are thinking versus servicing. At the time of speaking, how do you block that out? I really feel the servant leadership, that is what I am called to. Comment on that, Gary?
Yeah. So blocking it out, first of all, we still perceive, unless we're blind or, completely numb, we're still going to perceive if somebody is fiddling with their phone, blocking us out, daydreaming, whatever. However, what we focus on is a separate thing, being able to perceive, but then where am I going to shift my focus? And I really felt it real time. And it wasn't just this one time. I still have to do it. I still have to do it. I was speaking in May on the stage with the founder of Reebok. I was the last warm-up act for this guy. I have no business being on the same stage with Manny Ahome of Samaritan's Feet and Joe Foster, the founder of Reebok. And I felt the same thing. Like, what are people thinking? They're recording this, blah, blah, blah. All of my mistakes are going to be unearthed and shown. Of course they will. But it doesn't matter. Just focus on serving. And when you go, you know what? I want to convey something that's important. I want to show somebody that I care. I actually want to listen to them. Like those kind of things, that focus, it just kind of quiets the perception of these other things down. Like you can get past the noise of the distractions when you're laser focused. And it's hard, but it still comes. That's why Simon Sinek's message is so powerful. It comes down to your why. We've got to get really serious about that. What is your why? What is your motivation for doing this? And if it's just, about glorifying self or whatever, that will be unearthed. And then we're kind of on shaky ground, but that's okay. At least we know. Then we can course correct.
Yeah. It's again, the way that I've really began to understand it is that focusing on the day-to-day that we have, and we also have to consider, how are we measuring success? What is our success? And unfortunately, I think in our current cultures, success is more really about the reward. and it's not about the process that we go along the way. But the real success will not come fully anyway if that's all we're focused on. And so again, back to focusing on that journey. And one of the universal traits in our creation as a person is to be there to share our story to help other people. I mean, that is a universal role, universal charge, or whatever. And the more we can begin to get that, then we lose the focus on what other people think, because that doesn't matter if we're telling the story that we have and that we're walking through. We've got a couple other comments. Let's see. Jane has a comment and a question. That was imposter syndrome hitting you. You absolutely deserve to be there. Why? Because you were invited by someone who saw value in you. Would you agree with that?
Thank you, Jane. Yes, you're right.
And then Johan has another comment. True service is not being perfect. It's about being real. And you're real, my friend. People experience that. So, Gary, you're being encouraged here, brother. That you got to listen to the right voices, even in this case, right?
Yeah. That's so true. And just because I or anybody else has written a book on imposter syndrome doesn't mean that you're done with it once and for all.
No.
It still knocks on the door. It's just, are we going to let it in or not? And sometimes we just got to recognize it, but it's the same thing, man. I mean, at least I know the tools that actually punch it in the mouth. Like they just punch it in the mouth. And I'm not a violent person, but I do know this. A bully only understands one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I used to try to reason, be nice. And we had a client once that he was a retired Coca-Cola exec, and he had this big horse farm in Virginia. And, he was extremely wealthy, had done quite well, and he was running another company. But he was kind of a bully. And we were on a conference call with him, had the space phone, speakerphone, and all that. And he was calling from Virginia. We were up in Cleveland, and he made one of my colleagues cry because he was being relentless about, a disappointment about this or that. And Renee was really good. She was very good. And I just bowed up at that moment. Like, I was raised a pacifist, and as a Mennonite. All right. So come on, man. And I don't remember this guy's name, but I just said, all right, this meeting is now over. And he's like, what? I said, the meeting is now over. You have crossed the line. You've brought one of our people to tears, who is quite good and cares quite deeply about your account, but you've crossed the line and you've been a bully. So we're done. And he starts backpedaling. Whoop, 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 whoop. And it was just hilarious to watch, but I was just I wouldn't have done that for me. I would have just taken it. Yep. May I have another, sir? May I have another, sir? With him, seeing that happen is like, no. And I remember, and then he called and he's like, no, I really wanted, I said, no, we're done. You need a couple days to think about it, and we'll come back. And I knew, and I wasn't the president at this time of this company. I was brought in later to be president of it, but at that time I was not. And the president, the founder, was known for just kind of rolling over and letting his people get run over. And so it destroyed morale. And I thought, wait a minute. Is it that easy? Like, bullies just understand a swift punch right back in the nose. That's what they understand. And that's the way I look at it with imposter syndrome. I'm not hitting a person, but I'm just going to punch that thing in the nose. I'm going to make it shut up because it has, relegated me to the corner way too many times.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it do the same thing for other people that are quite accomplished, quite good, but don't think that they're worthy of being in the room. So I'm like, yeah, hit them with your best shot. And these things, and it's not just one of these things. And there are probably other weapons that I'm not aware of, but it's usually a combination of these weapons that will actually do a pretty good job of shutting it down.
And it has to be, you've got to be discerning to be able to use the appropriate weapon in the appropriate way at the appropriate time. And that, in my estimation, part of the key to discernment is having wisdom.
Yes.
Discernment's a byproduct. Johan has a question for you, Gary. Why do you think it's easier standing up for someone else you care about than to stand up for yourself?
Woo, Johan, you are a deep thinker.
Jump in the deep end on that one, didn't he?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think in some ways it goes back to how I was raised. I'm not sure, but I think so. Where, my mom, my 88-year-old mom, still, if she gets a compliment from somebody, she'll say, well, I don't know about that. Deflect. Mm-hmm. And I that's how I was raised. That's how I responded to any kind of a compliment. And so I remember I was with a woman from Opelika, Alabama, and she's a very powerful, very rich woman. And she paid me a compliment. She was in our group. And I said, well, I don't know about that. And in her Southern Belle, but she's like a velvet hammer, she's like a sledgehammer with a velvet glove. She said, Gary, a simple thank you will suffice. And I'm like, I was embarrassed to hear that, but she was right.
Yeah.
Just say thank you. But, that's kind of related to your question, Johan, but I don't know. I think there is a danger when we think about ourselves so much. And I think I probably want to counterbalance and pendulum swing too far. And that may be why. But it's just like, I still come back to, something that Jesus said. He said, the Son of Man came not to be served, mm-hmm. but to serve. Well, think about that. That is, if he is who he claimed to be, and I believe he is, but if he is, he spun the universe. So go watch look at the pictures from the Webb telescope or the Hubble before that. And I read something, I think a week ago, where they said the known expansiveness of the universe is, I think, if I remember right, it was about 60 billion light years across. Like, I can't even imagine 1 light year, much less 60 billion,
Right.
And then you take the expansiveness of that down to the most minute molecule or atom that we know about. And the guy that created all of that is the one that said, I didn't come to be served, but I came to serve. Yeah. Mind blowing. So for me, that's what I want to keep front and center. When we want to climb up on the throne, be worshiped, have people curtsy to us, we're in danger. King Nebuchadnezzar, in the height of his empire, walking on his roof, looking around, hey, look at what I've done. Mm-hmm. The next 7 years, he is eating grass, His fingernails are growing like claws, and they think he's a wild, crazy man. And then he comes to his senses and realizes, wait a minute, I don't even breathe without it being a gift from God. Think about that.
Yeah. I think that part of what we're talking about here is an understanding of our value as a human, as God's creation, and then how to balance the characteristics, because humility is essential.
Yeah.
It's essential, but we can't devalue who we are in our humility, because Jesus in his walk was he humbled himself remarkably, and that's a given. But he never lost sight of the fact that he was part of the Godhead.
All right.
And carrying that balance is such a key, because something I think we even talked about it one of the other episodes is the great command: love God above everything else. But the second part of that was to love our neighbor. But the key balance there is as ourself. And that value as a created being has to be there. And when we can keep that balance in place, somebody brings to us a kind comment, sometimes people try to bless us and serve us. And if we're out of balance and focused on being a servant, which sounds great, but without that balance, we've got a problem, because if we are always in the servant role and never allow others to be served, we're robbing them of the blessings. And such a tough concept. In fact, I'll throw out a book recommendation, an old book. It's hard to find. It's called Balanced Christianity. And it talks about the key, balance is having a firm grasp on both opposing characteristics. And I think that's an essential thing that we need today, is that we need to be humble, but we also need to accept humility from others in whatever form that looks like. And
I agree. They say it's not about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking about yourself less.
Yeah.
and so that's really, and I'm not trying to make it all about the book. Really, I'm not. But weapon number 6 is celebrate the anything but typical in yourself and others. Like, celebrate it.
Yeah.
Don't try to compare. Well, I'm not as good. I'm not as tall. I'm not as whatever. Celebrate your uniqueness, because that's how God created you. Celebrate the uniqueness of other people, because that's how God created them. That just shuts down this comparison thing. And I think that is extremely liberating.
Very.
To just, hey, God made you unique. Isn't that cool? And look at nature, man. Just look at the amazing variety of plants, birds, animals, fish, just unbelievable people. I truly believe God loves diversity, because, and I'm not talking about as we define it. The way we define diversity now is like quotas, and mind meld, you must subscribe to my way of thinking.
Right.
No, if you want to have a really strong team, have people that think differently than you, aligned by a common vision, and they will bring different facets of the diamond to bear and to focus, and you will be a much stronger team. Like a team of all Michael Jordans probably wouldn't have been as good as a team of one Michael Jordan and one Scottie Pippen and one Dennis Rodman.
Yeah.
Really? Look at Rodman all those piercings and tattoos, and he can't shoot that great, but man, that dude could rebound.
Yeah.
That dude could rebound, and that's what a guy that isn't going to hit 100% of the shots, Michael Jordan, you need somebody that can rebound, So that's where I go, just the wonder of it all is so beautiful. Instead of comparing and feeling less than and like, or just, envying somebody, no, just celebrate, their uniqueness and what they were able to do. And the fact is, they don't draw a breath without it being a gift. Neither do you, or neither do I.
Well, and until we can truly value ourselves as we've been created, we're going to find it very difficult to value others. It can't be one. It's not one or the other. It has to be both. And if we miss either one of those, there's a problem. And we have to really be mindful of that because otherwise we get caught up in things that are going to be harmful to us, which we need to understand. Part of wisdom is, I know if I have a problem, if there's some issue with me, I don't do that in isolation. It impacts other people. And that perspective helps to keep it in a better perspective. Let's see. The other Johan has a comment. Let's see what he says. He talks about 1 John 3:18, says, "Dear children, let us not love with words or tongue, but with actions and in truth." Your actions will speak much louder than any words you will ever say. It's very important that as Christians, we follow the example of Jesus Christ. And he explained that we are all given gifts and talents to serve others, not ourselves, as we complement each other. Key word there, compliment.
Yeah.
And well put. Your thoughts on that one?
Man, I'll tell you what, there's some wisdom coming out of Cape Town, South Africa this morning with those two Johans, man. And Johan, if you don't know each other, I know Cape Town's a big city. You ought to meet each other. Connect with one another. Because I know this, Johan Kornoff is one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met. And his story is unbelievable. And he is alive by a miracle. He was supposed to have been dead a year ago when COVID ravaged his lungs. 90% were dead. His lungs are fully recovered, which is a medical impossibility. And I am so grateful for you, Johan. So, so just seeing your name here and seeing two Johans, I'm like, man, I hope you guys connect.
Yeah. Well, and what the beauty that we're enjoying here is the value of relationship, the value of sharing community, because one of the best things we're going to have to struggle through to get some wisdom, no doubt. And some of us, like me, are a little more hard-headed, so we have to struggle extra. But
I'm with you.
Yeah, we can learn and gain wisdom from each other. And that's the beauty of what this podcast is about, is to gain that wisdom from each other. We have Sharon joining us from China. Wow.
Hey,
welcome.
Sharon.
Glad to have you here, Sharon. But we're unfortunately wrapping up. And Gary, last thoughts as we wrap up today?
Yeah, so in the United States, we are celebrating Thanksgiving on Thursday. And here would be my thought to anybody watching or listening to this. I think we can have Thanksgiving every day. I think an attitude of gratitude is critical. It doesn't mean that we're thankful for everything, because there's a lot of heartache and a lot of evil happening in the world. You may be going through really difficult times, and it doesn't mean that we have to be thankful for that, but I believe it and I've seen it, and it's probably saved my life. We can be thankful in spite of it. We can be thankful in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
And being intentionally grateful is a really important thing. And that's what I learned in the depths of my despair in 2009 in particular. And it was a lesson, a hard lesson learned, but man, it is so freeing. So I would just say, I hope everybody has a wonderful Thanksgiving on Thursday, but I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving today and tomorrow and every day that you are given breath.
Great way to close out, Gary. Yes. Attitude of gratitude is a game changer when we walk it and live it. So thank you for being with us, Gary. It's always great. Enjoy our time together. And obviously it resonates with a lot of people. So thank you for that. And we'll have to look at maybe another time. It seems like it works well.
Sounds good.
So we'll be back with the Wisdom Seeker Live podcast next Monday, 8:00 a.m. Eastern. And I'd love to have you with us. And the goal is we want to be wisdom seekers together. And if we can do that, then we've had a good day. And don't forget to order or get a copy of Gary's book. Show them
thank you. Yes, yeah. Silence the Imposter. Thank you.
Yeah,
maybe sure we can make it up to 250.
I don't know, Gary. You might be tempted to get a big head if you make it to 250. So everyone have a blessed week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next week. Take care, and have a blessed holiday for those of you celebrating Thanksgiving. Bye now.
See ya.